Broken Entertainment. So we have some major news coming out of comic books that has ramifications for other entertainment industries, particularly, I think, how publishing itself, traditional publishing of books, is going to move forward down the road now. I believe in this instance that this is a canary in the coal mine situation, and that we're not going to see this sea change that I'm going to be talking about in book publishing for another 5 to 10 years, more than likely, because while the technology is there, the platforming hasn't really caught up the way it has with comic books. But let's go ahead and get into it. So, Batman writer James Tynion IV quits book and moved to Substack and creator-owned Focus. The Eisner-winning writer of DC Comics' Batman ongoing series has announced his exit from the series. James Tynion IV leaves Gotham City behind to launch a new comic, Blue Book, with acclaimed artist Michael Avon Oeming via a Substack newsletter. This wasn't an easy decision. Tynion told the New York Times, "In order to invest my time in new material, I need to choose. I could not do both." DC Comics announced Tynion as the new Batman writer on Batman Day in 2019. He's led the Batman led through a period that's editing. It's your friend. He's led Batman through a period of expansion, including a relaunch with the beginning of the Infinite Frontier era. And his run will continue through the upcoming Fear State event and end in November. While Tynion is known to DC Comics fans for his work on Batman, he's built up a stellar catalog of creator-owned comics. Something is Killing the Children has been a hit Boom Comics, with a spin-off series and Netflix adaptation in the works. In a post on Substack, Tynion expressed a desire to create more of his content as a big reason for moving away from DC. Quote, "I was trying to make one of the most difficult decisions of my professional life. DC had presented me with a 3-year renewal of my exclusive contract with the intent of me working on Batman for the bulk of that time. I was grateful of the offer, but I couldn't help but look at the success of my original creator-owned titles and wonder if it was the right choice. And then I received another contract, the best I've ever been given in a decade as a professional comic book writer, a grant from Substack to create a new slate of original comic book properties directly on their platform that my co-creators and I would own completely, with Substack taking none of the intellectual property rights or even the publishing rights. Given my bandwidth, I knew I could only pick one of the two contracts sitting in front of me. Which is a lot of preamble to say I'm going to be leaving Batman with issue 117 in November and the Joker with issue 14 next April, with no immediate plans to write any other superhero comics in the near future. Instead, I'm going to dedicate my whole brain to building a bunch of really cool stuff on my own terms without having to get permission from a publisher to make it." Those are big sentences that we're going to talk about down the road here. But this is a sign, if you really wanted to find one and you didn't want to talk about numbers, this is a sign the comic book industry is falling apart. Because before, people would flock to DC and Marvel, and now they're running the other direction. And creator-owned comics has really, really taken off, particularly in the United States, and for good reason. They own all the property rights, they own everything involved in the process. If a Netflix show is made, if a movie is made, they get all of that money. If you make Batman comics for DC and they make a Batman movie and it makes $1 billion, you get like probably none of that, or very little of it. And it's because you don't own Batman. But the infrastructure for comics is there already. It's been developing over the last 5 to 10 years, give or take. And you see companies that are pushing these creator-owned things like Substack, but you also see a lot of very successful crowdfunding campaigns and people making good money in ways that they just can't in the traditional comic publishing industry. So where does that stack up? Why am I calling this canary in the coal mine? Because the comic book industry is ahead of the traditional publishing industry in regards of what's going on. right now the traditional publishing industry is talking a lot about all the money they're making. Saying, oh, and I'll show you that in a minute. Oh, we're making a whole bunch of money now. Look at us. We're very successful. I don't know why people are saying we're dying. Well, we'll get into that. Let's take a look. This is from Tom Weldon, who runs or ran the Penguin Random House UK side. And he says, publishers are becoming more like broadcasters. But he could have said impresarios. Caitlin Moran, a columnist and author of a very modern feminist manifesto, How to Be a Woman, is going on tour. The publisher sold more than 10,000 tickets for 9 events in 3 days. Although he stresses he's not becoming a retailer, Penguin Random House is going into merchandise and branding like never before. These developments are most evident in children's publishing, where much-loved characters such as Peter Rabbit, the Snowman, Topsy, and Tim are being made to work much harder. The company has spent almost £10 million creating Peter Rabbit the animated series, which has exported to 15 countries with a wide range of merchandise tie-ins. In Japan, where Peter Rabbit is a hit among women aged 20 to 40, the radish-stealing rabbit is helping to sell Toyota's latest family hybrid and adorns Mitsubishi Bank's cash machines. In the children's market, Weldon says animation products keep children engaged with the printed page when apps, videos, and games are vying for their free time. Only a company with Penguin Random House's heft can move into these areas on such a scale. Our size gives us an advantage. Weldon has to be the main UK spokesman for a mega merger that some feared would leave 2 great publishers lost in a muddy bureaucracy. This merger has a greater chance of succeeding 8 to 9 months in. Things are going extremely well. We had our best results. We're consistently publishing bestsellers. So here's kind of the thing. The traditional publishing industry, see, and then he says it down here too, the industry loves debuts and brands. The traditional publishing industry is moving into this realm of, okay, well, to make money, to survive the 21st century, not only do we need to do audiobooks and digital books and so on and so forth, but we're going to do branding, we're going to do marketing, we're going to sell toys, we're going to sell cartoons, we're going to push movies. That changes how they acquire books. In one sense, it means that they're going to look for more books, but in the other sense, it means they're going to cut the cord faster. If you're not producing, if you're not getting that leverage that they want, they're just probably going to drop you. And when you look at a lot of contracts for these, authors can wind up signing away the rights to this kind of stuff and not even know it. And even if they do know it, more money up front will be waved in their face usually. The end result is in traditional publishing, you have a lot less control, just like James Tynion is saying. He has a lot more control with his creator-owned stuff. With self-publishing, you have way more control. Traditional publishing controls your marketing. Traditional publishing controls your book cover. Traditional publishing controls any maps inside of the book. Traditional publishing has editors that are going to edit your content as well as your grammar. And they're going to push certain things and ideologies quite potentially. I've seen specific examples of that from people. I'm going to let them tell their own stories. I'm not going to go into that, but it does happen. And then you got to remember the traditional publishing industry itself has become very politically ideological. And we've gone over that in previous videos, so we won't go into it here. What you're going to see, and what you've already seen, is a huge rise in self-publishing. But that hasn't translated yet to authors saying, oh, I'm going to move to self-publishing over these other options. Necessarily, you're not seeing J.K. Rowling do a bunch of self-published stuff, for example, just to pick a name out of a hat. But you are seeing some of it. You're seeing a shift. Brandon Sanderson is still traditionally published, but he has taken increasing control over his work. He has an in-house team. He has people that help him do the work. And he's building a machine to support him. rather than relying on his publisher entirely. And in an interview with Shadden Brooks, he said specifically, if I were starting today, I would choose self-publishing. The control that you get, the amount of the profit margin that you get is significantly higher. You control the cover, you control the marketing, you control the content, you control all of the rights. You sign nothing away. Now, should you get a content editor? Yes, absolutely. But there's a different interaction there when you are the boss, when you're the one who has hired the content editor. If the content editor pushes things that you don't think have any business being in the book, and I'm not talking about from a professional perspective, but an ideological one, you have or feel like you have more power to say no. Whereas a lot of people who are first-time authors being traditionally published feel like they can't say no. You know, this is the editor of Penguin Random House. I've got to say yes. You know, there are still plenty of good reasons for people to get traditionally published at. But we're seeing the setup for this same kind of movement. We're just not there yet. The infrastructure is not there yet. With self-publishing, it's very easy to do, but we don't have the big success stories yet that are widespread like you do in crowdfunded comics, and part of that is cost. It's very, very easy to self-publish, and it can also be very, very expensive. You get content editors, you get grammatical editors, you get professional cover artists that's all they do for books. You know, you push marketing really heavily in social media and online. You set up a author platform, all this stuff. You know, you're looking at, and if you want to do an audio book without going through Audible, that's another $3,000. Editors can be a couple $1,000s each. Covers for books can be, $500-$600. And these are rough figures here. Don't quote me on any of it. That gets expensive really quickly. So you're not seeing yet those significant infrastructure built by independent authors that push platforms, that push books, that get the attention. And you're not seeing a lot of self-published authors yet openly say, I'm self-publishing and I'm not looking at traditional publishing. Most of them say, I'm self-publishing, I like the control, I like this. But, if I get a traditional publishing contract, that's great. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong. Whatever you as an author or a creator need to do or desire to do, that's perfectly fine. That's your book, that's your content, that's your creation. But eventually, I believe, this shift's going to start happening. I don't want to sell my book so that somebody else can make the money. I don't want to sell my book so that somebody can go to China and have, somebody make it in a factory somewhere, ship it back, and sell cups or what have you with my character's logo on it or my character's face on it, and I make, percent of the profit. And I don't want somebody who is more interested in how many mugs can we sell and what cartoons can we make out of this than how awesome can we make this book. That's not what I want. I want the control, and I want somebody in my corner. That means me. I'm in my corner. And you're going to see more of that over time, but I think we're still 5 to 10 years down the road. You still have a lot of people going and doing these things and then trying to use self-publishing to get into the traditional market, into traditional publishing. Where I think if you self-publish, you should feel good about that. You should say, I want to self-publish, and that's the end of the sentence. How often do we feel like we have to apologize for self-publishing? Oh, I'm self-publishing, but only not because I can't get sold to a traditional publisher, no. Right now in books, people are made to feel bad for self-publishing because there's kind of this stigma of like, oh, you're self-publishing because you can't make it. And some of that, sometimes that's true. Let's be honest. But that's not the only reason people self-publish. And increasingly, that's not going to be the reason people self-publish. Because more and more people are aware of all the control that traditional publishing gets, and they want that control for themselves. You want a bigger share. You want more money. You spend all this time creating something, and then somebody else profits off of it. Now, you can get into Amazon and how all that's handled. I don't really want to go there in this video, but there's different platforms out there, different things people can do. And you're going to see that move. And it's not going to happen today, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but you're going to see that sea change, and it's going to follow a similar trajectory to comics, okay? Originally, when people started self-publishing their comics, which is what crowdfunding is. Okay, now I realize James Tynion's not crowdfunding. He's going through a company, but crowdfunding is making this possible because you're seeing these smaller companies say, you know what? A lot of these independent creators are having great success, and if we can give somebody like a James Tynion control and say, hey, do what you want, we just want to make money off of it, they're going to do that. It's worked very well, and it's because you're seeing these crowdfunded books go for $34,000, $50,000, $80,000, $1.5 million, $2 million. So they know that market's out there. Right now, we don't see that in book publishing yet. Because nobody's made those platforms yet. Nobody's made those leaps. Nobody has done that kind of work where a whole perception of a segment of the industry flips on its head. Because we've gone from, oh, you guys are just doing that because you can't make it, to, oh crap, Cyberfrog made $1 million. Oh crap, Cyberfrog 2 made $2 million. For years, as these people like Ethan Van Sciver started working on their comics, the professionals in the industry and a lot of readers said, oh, you're just doing it because you can't make it. But once the book publishing industry, the self-publishing industry, gets its Ethan Van Scivers, once you get huge success stories, and I'm not talking about, we all know which one I'm talking about. Okay? Yes, there have been some success stories. And yes, those books are terribly written. And yes, they're basically porn. Okay? And not very good at what they do. But they sold very well, and it involves the word gray. But I'm not going to push that book or that book series because I think it's trash. But when you start seeing real success with equal to or even better publishing quality of the traditional publishers, I think then you're going to start to see a change in how people perceive the self-published book. And when you start to see that book out there in the marketplace more and more, you're going to see this change. And then eventually you're going to have people who are fence sitters who are going, I'm traditionally published, but boy, I wish I had more control. Who might go, I'm going to take a shot. Now, Chris Ferracchio, who does the Sun Eater series, has self-published some of his works. I think that's very interesting. He's not a giant name yet, but I think you're starting to see it already to some extent. You're seeing an experimentation by some people, and you're seeing experimentation by people in self-publishing as well. Now, this is just my thoughts on this. But this is where I see everything going. And like I said, it's going to take some time. The first thing that had to happen was self-publishing had to take off, and it did. The next thing that has to happen is there need to be people that elevate people's perceptions and say, so where people go from, it's just people who couldn't make it, to, there's some pretty good books out there that aren't published by traditional publishing companies. 7,000 Shades of whatever doesn't count. Nobody reads that Okay, most people don't read that and say, what a high quality book. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will say that this is this is the area I'm pushing from my side. I'm not self-publishing for any reason other than I want that control. I want to build that platform. I want to have people pick up my book and say, wow, look at the quality of this thing. You know, when I got my first copy of Cyberfrog, that's what I literally said, wow. And I put it next to a DC comic, and I'm like, wow, this is put together a lot better. I want to be there. I want my imprint. I want to be out there. I want to be in the market. I want to change perspectives of how people view self-publishing. Because I don't want somebody else telling me how much money I'm allowed to make. And I don't want somebody else telling me how successful I am allowed to be, other than the customer. But let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell for notification, and I will see you next time.